This video will probably require quite a bit of editing later on, so that'll be fun for me. Hello folks, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for me today. No story today, unfortunately. Instead, just some things with real life. It is a kind of serious business. Yeah, we'll say it's a serious business video today, and you know it's serious because I have notes and I'm wearing pants. So that is pretty good indication that it's something I really want to talk about. And the subject of today's video is gothiness, the goth scale, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the reason I am making this is I saw some, as is so often the case, some internet nonsense, specifically a little bit of Twitter nonsense. A person I follow on Twitter, I believe their handle is Gothic Charm School. Elder goth person, seems really cool. I quite like them. Cool pictures, nice cats. Just all in all, a nice time. What had happened was Gothic Charm School had made some Twitter post to the effect that I'm not sure if they created the hashtag or they're using an existing one, but they were using and reblogging the hashtag This Is Goth because people that either follow them or maybe people they know in real life, other alt-styled sort of people were basically saying they were getting a lot of flack for not being goth enough and being a poser, and that they weren't pretty enough, they weren't young enough, they weren't doing goth the right way. And what really caught my attention was the word poser, because that is a word I have not heard used unironically since high school. And it really got me thinking about just having a more alternative, sort of non-mainstream aesthetic, and how that affects how you move through the world, and sent me down this path of sort of inner nostalgia to what my own experience had been, and just how ridiculous it is that now, long after my high school experience, the word poser is still a thing. I genuinely had totally forgotten about it. When it comes to my memory, I'm a little bit strange. Basically, what happens is once I sort of process or feel like a section of my life is over. And I don't mean like, oh, the things are so terrible, everything in my life is over. What I mean is when I came out of high school, when I finish university, when I leave a job, whatever it is, my brain just flips a switch and says, oh, that part of our life is over, we're done with that. We're going to get rid of a lot of our memories to, I don't know, make space for new knowledge. I don't know. That's what my brain seems to do. But for some reason, these tweets about people being called posers and not real goths, not real alternative people, just like broke through my compartmentalized, no, we're done with this, we don't need this anymore, part of my brain. And I remembered a lot of things. I started thinking about a lot of things. And in the end, I decided I was going to make this video about things from real life, my experience, that have to do with the idea of goth all the time and being goth enough and being a poser and all these sorts of things. And also, I hurt my back rather, not seriously, but enough to be rather painful earlier in the week. So instead of looking for another story to read, I was laying on the couch full of Motrin and trying not to move around too much. I'm better now, but basically what that means is I have this video this week instead of a story. And who knows, people might find this to be a little more interesting than a spooky story anyway. Pardon me. And at the end of the day, it's my channel, and if I want to make a video about gothiness, I'm free to do so. And as I said, taking it fairly seriously in that I've made notes. So I just couldn't believe it. Poser? Like really? Really? That's still a thing. So what I thought I would do here is I've sort of told you kind of how this video came about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own experience with goth subcultures, alternative subcultures, and just as a person who is now in their 30s, and I know that's not really, that's not like old, it's certainly not elder goth, but it's maybe a bit of a different perspective than people who are new to it, or for whatever reason aren't comfortable enough in their identities to tell these people calling them a poser to just fuck off. Because like that, generally, I'm at the point in my life where that would be the case. That wasn't always true, but it is now. So me, myself, personally, goth tends to be a label that is given to me by other people. It's not one I necessarily assign to myself. I get why people would call me goth, why they would assume that that's how I would identify myself, and some days I do, some days I don't. You know, the aesthetic part of my identity is quite fluid. So, how did it all happen for me? You're totally interested, I'm sure. But as I said, my video, my channel, and you know, for the 30 people or so who are subscribed, maybe this will be interesting, maybe not. I don't know. I was always, as a kid, I was always someone who was quite comfortable, quite happy in my own company. I wouldn't say I had a strong sense of identity of self, but you know, I had a pretty strong sense of what I liked and what I did like and what I didn't like. There were times as a child where I would try to fit in. You know, you try to change yourself, the way you dress, your interests, whatever, to fit in with what is more cool, what is more in at that moment in time. In my case, it was the late 90s, early 2000s. And, you know, I would do it, and I would, for a little while, I would fit in with other groups of kids. But at the end of the day, what I always came back to was the fact that hanging out with these people and having them think I'm cool wasn't worth the trade-off of having to present myself in a way that didn't feel like me, or in a way that I just had no real genuine interest in. Like, are the Spice Girls near and dear to my heart? Yes. I mean, that was a really big pop culture thing that happened when I was growing up, but like I was never a diehard Spice Girls fan. Like, I think it's cool, but like when a lot of the other kids were super into it, I just wasn't. So I never had this huge, I must change. I never had like Hallmark movie levels of I must change to fit in, but I would try and do it occasionally. But at the end of the day, it just was never something I stuck to. And the older I got, the more comfortable I got with that. You know what? I'm never going to be in the inner circle of the cool kids, but I've got a couple good friends that I really like. I have my interests that I like, and that's fine. That's fine for me. So I just went through until high school being not an outcast, not bullied seriously. I think most kids take a certain amount of bullying, but nothing that was concerning. Just sort of being on the fringes. Like, nobody particularly had a vendetta against me, but I wasn't really in the inner circle with the cool kids. So very, very ordinary in all respects. And then I got to high school, and a friend of mine got super into goth in quite a serious way. And when I was staying over at their place for a sleepover, this friend of mine is no longer a friend, but not for subculture related reasons. We grew apart, rediscovered each other years later, and I realized I just essentially had nothing in common with this person anymore, that's what happens, that's part of growing up and finding yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. And they were super goth. They got me into it. Loved a lot of the music. So all the usual suspects. Susie and the Banshees and all the very traditional gothic groups. I didn't know about a whole lot of sort of goth genre music for a long time, because if some of you are of the same vintage as myself, or possibly older, I'm sure you remember when the internet was, we were not born with the internet. Like the internet came into our homes when we were already adolescents, teenagers, and it's something that for a long time there wasn't a whole lot, or at least for me, there wasn't a whole lot that I even thought to search for. So a lot of the goth that I grew up with was a lot more DIY, a lot more word of mouth, just because the vast internet resources that exist now did not exist yet. But I really identified with this idea that is in a lot, not just goth, but in a lot of alternative subcultures, that you don't necessarily fit in, for whatever reason that is, for not really identifying with a lot of the popular culture. And then I was introduced to the music and really loved it, and was introduced to the aesthetic and the wearing all black, and loved that as well, particularly the styles that looked more that looked more historic, particularly sort of Victorian, medieval. I thought that was super cool, which ended up being a bit of an indication for my future, as I do now work in history. So I did it. I listened to the music. I wore the clothes. It was never a problem in my home. My mother is an artist, so anything sort of aesthetic wise was fine. It was never forbidden. My parents never had any issue with the music I listened to. Again, my mother, a teenager of the 70s, and David Bowie and Queen and all that, which I know, like, you can have this whole discussion about whether or not that's a lot of popular music. But basically what I'm saying is she was quite comfortable, both as an artist and as a person, with things that were a little more out of the ordinary and flamboyant and things of that nature. So that she never had a problem with that. When she realized that this was something I wanted to do, she actually took me clothes shopping. She said, well, you've got like one black t-shirt and you can't wear that all the time. That's disgusting and unhygienic. So let's go get you some black clothes. I wanted to dye my hair blue. Okay, fine. Let's go to the store, and I think we're probably going to have to bleach your hair first because your hair is quite dark. So those sorts of things were fine. So in high school, for a year or two, I did like the full black clothing, the really, really thick eyeliner. This was before I realized that I have like semi-hooded eyes, and thus I can't do eyeliner the same way a lot of people do. But that's not the point. I mean, we all make mistakes with makeup when we're young and starting out, and arguably I'm not even that much better now. But so I fully into it, and things just happen. I mean, part of the factor is being young and not so good at makeup, and this idea that someone who is goth must be goth all the time. And believing in that actually pushed me out of it, because for high school, I didn't go to my home school. I was in a specialized language program, which meant I was on public transit every morning for 40 minutes, an hour, depending on the day and the traffic. and being someone who still, as an adult, needs quite a bit of sleep. I didn't like because again, this idea that to be goth, you must be 100% in all facets of your life all the time. As a young person, I really bought into that. So at the end of it, I just sort of said, you know what? I don't want to be getting up extra early, or, using my time to be doing all of this makeup and all this, like, all the clothes and all that. And I just sort of said, you know what, this is a bit too much work. So because I believed in that whole, you must be goth 100% all the time to be goth, for you to be a real quote unquote goth, whatever the fuck that means. So I stopped. And later on in university, I would make the argument that everybody gets lazier in university, but again, didn't really do it. And then as a young adult, moving from school to the workforce, the idea that full goth all the time, which again, I believed you had to do to conform to this idea of being a real goth, not necessarily going to be appropriate for the workplace, or at least not necessarily going to be appropriate for trying to be hired in a workplace. So, you need a job. So, and at this point, I hadn't done it for a number of years. So I had grown away from it very much because of this idea that you need to be goth or alternative, and you need to do that in all facets of your life all the time, or you're a poser. Of course, with age comes wisdom, and I now know that that is not true. There are lots and lots of reasons why somebody who's into goth, into punk, into metal, into Lolita style, whatever, and they aren't that way 100% in all facets of their lives all the time. One, and I stand by this, it is work. It is a lot of work to do the makeup and the hair and DIYing of a lot of the clothing, which is what a lot of us were doing, at least where I lived in the early 2000s, just because the stores that existed elsewhere they weren't in Canada yet. So you couldn't, we didn't have Hot Topic. We didn't have a lot of those other places. So there was a lot of DIYing. And even back then, had we had those stores, my family certainly did not have the money to be shopping at those places. So I would have had to DIY it regardless. And it's work. And you know what? To wake up in the morning and, I've got to go to the grocery store, or I've got to go to the pharmacy. The idea that I need to then do my hair, do my makeup, put on all the clothes and all that stuff, and then go out just to run these few simple errands. I didn't want to do that. Nobody wants to do that. I don't feel like it today is a perfectly valid reason for not looking the way the subculture you love says you should. And it's not even the subculture itself. It's not a sentient being. It's assholes within the subculture. And just, like I said, you can not want to do it. You can have a job where that is not appropriate. You can have family or friends where, if you put all that on, if you dress a certain way, maybe they don't forbid it. And there's lots of families where that is the case, unfortunately. But you're going to hear about it. And, do you really have the energy today to deal with it? One thing I've noticed since sort of coming back to a goth adjacent identity is if I've been wearing black, if I've been wearing sort of more alternative fashions for maybe a few days or even a few weeks in a row, and then I turn up one day and I look, quote, normal, I get comments on that. Oh, look who's not all in black today. And it's like, sometimes it's like you can't win. So somebody not wanting to deal with those things, I get it. It happens. There are so many reasons why goth in all facets of your life, Lolita in all facets of your life, punk in all facets of your life, 100% all the time, is absolutely not feasible. And I am not the first person to say this. I know Jake Monroe has made videos about this, of Herbs and Altars has made videos about this, has mentioned it in videos. Dorian actually has an excellent video about conformity and the issues of conformity within Goth culture, a culture that's meant to be like rebellious and all that. You should check those videos out, particularly the Herbs and Altar ones about conformity. It's very, very interesting, and both of those creators are very articulate, probably much more articulate than I am on the issues. But like, you don't have to be all the time, and there's lots of reasons for it. And somebody who says that you must be Goth all the time, 100% in your life, one is probably, I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not very old. Like they're probably quite young. They probably are in a living situation where they can be Goth all the time for whatever reason, none of my business, whatever. But somebody that's coming after you and calling you a poser in 2020 and 2021 is absurd. There are so many reasons why you're not in full kit all the time. And all of those reasons are valid. From I don't feel like it to my family will kick me out if I do it. All of those reasons are absolutely valid for you, for me, for anybody. They are valid reasons. And for somebody to say you're a poser if you don't, that person is quite young and probably has or at the very least has a very limited world experience, and is also an asshole. Let's be honest. That is an asshole thing to say, and it's an asshole thing. So like, I'm familiar with this jerks and assholes in not even just in any culture, saying that, well, you're a poser because you're not goth enough, you're not punk enough, you don't have enough facial piercings to be punk, or whatever the stupid criticism is. And it's ridiculous. And those people are not worth your time. They are not worth that space in your head. Absolutely not. You are a valid person, you are a valid participant in the subculture, however you are able to participate, period. Ranting dries my throat out. Who knew? And again, like, it's just ridiculous. So shifting gears, coming back to my personal experience and how I kind of came back to it. Well, I became an adult. I finally was making enough money through work where I could move in with my now spouse. And I came across, I don't remember which happened first. I don't remember if I saw the dress first or if I found of Herbs and Altars first. Maybe they happened within a few days of each other. But I found of Herbs and Altars' YouTube channel, and Dorian is a very articulate, well-spoken person, I find. So I watched all the videos that they have about the subculture and the goth conformity crisis and all of these other things. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's true. And I also, around the same time, being, again, somebody who grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was on probably Etsy, and I found, you guys will probably remember those black velvet mini dresses, like the little short sleeves. I'd had one when I was in high school and gotten rid of it, and I found one on Etsy, and I saved it to my favorites, and I was just sort of sighing over it for a few days. Oh, I remember when I had this dress. I remember wearing it and listening to Marianne, and I just had all these pleasant feelings of my experience of being goth and how it felt, how it made me feel, and how the music made me feel. And I sighed over it for several days before finally saying, you know what, I'm going to buy the dress. Like this, it just sort of became a representation of this very formative experience that I'd had growing up. So I bought the dress, it came, I tried it on, it was a good fit, and loved it, and was very, very happy with it. And as you know, I sort of rediscovered a lot of these things that I'd forgotten since I'd totally forgotten about since high school. And I started to think, well, why did I stop? Why did I stop wearing the black? And not that you exclusively wear black when you're goth. I don't believe that for a second. Why did I stop? I love the clothes. I love the music. I didn't go to a lot of events. Just like I said, I've always been a person who's quite happy in my own company. So going to clubs and stuff has never interested me whatsoever. But like I remembered all these other things that had been so pleasant, and I started thinking about it. And again, after watching a lot of these videos, I was like, you know what? There's no reason I can't jump back into it. In many cases, it's going to be easier now because I'm an adult with my own money. So I did. I found, because it's so much easier now, and I found brands that I love, and I started going to thrift stores again because I just love I love thrift shopping, so that was a no-brainer. And I started doing all of these things and listening to this music and finding more music that I love, because again, the internet makes it so much easier now. And just being very happy with it and enjoying and loving it. And on the more practical side of things, one of the places I used to work at, again, when you work in history, in living history, it can be quite a dirty environment. And what sort of sealed the deal one day is I was coming out of a building, and I had my own clothing on, so black. And I had on my hand a big smear. I don't know if it was stove blacking or coal dust, but I had it on my hand. It's like, well, I don't want to go through on my work day. And I was with a group, so I couldn't go and wash my hands. So it's like, well, I'm not going to go and touch everything and like smear stove blacking all over everything. So it's like, well, I'm wearing black. And just like rubbed it off on my t-shirt. And that sort of sealed the deal with like, right, I'm getting back into this, not only because I've rediscovered my love of it, but because of my work environment. And yeah, if I have soot on my hands from cleaning lamps, and I know I can't get to a place where I can wash my hands. This is, of course, all pre-pandemic. You know, rub it on your shirt, rub it on your pants, whatever, it's fine. Go do it. It's great. And that really sealed the deal. And now, you know, I'm very happy with the way I look and my aesthetic, and the fact that, you know what, one day when I'm doing a video, as I obviously am today, I'm going to look like this. Like, look at my sleeves. These are so great. Look at my jewelry, and I love it. But tomorrow, if I have to go to the drugstore to pick something up, I can put on my sweatpants and an old sweater, and it's absolutely fine. And I don't feel like I would be less of a goth if I were to do that, because my identity is not wrapped up in 100% being goth all the time. And I'll give you an example. So for Christmas, my parents gave me this sweater. It's very Canadian, really, with the motifs in it. You've probably noticed it is not black, but you know something? It's warm, it's convenient, and I'm gonna wear it. I wear it all the time now when I have to just nip out to the store for something. And it's great. And I don't consider myself to be less of a gothically inclined person because I'm wearing a very Canadiana sort of sweater with some caribou on it, or some deer, whichever. I'm not sure which those are supposed to be. And I'm fine with that. And if that's how you feel, you should be fine with it too. There are so many ways of expressing yourself and expressing your participation in a subculture without having to look like you've just been taken out of the pages of an alt magazine 100% in your life all of the time. And I also don't think you need to categorize yourself. That seems to be a new thing in both like the goth subculture and the pagan community. Or maybe it's just me being an introvert and not really interested in other people as a child, as an adolescent, or now, and not really noticing. But it seems to me like nowadays I see way more, what kind of goth are you? Or these are the 5 types of witch. What are you? That's not true. You don't have to worry about categorizing yourself in any of those ways if you don't want to. If you like those labels, I personally find them helpful if I'm shopping and looking for something, but beyond that, I don't really use them. That's fine. If you want to use them, great. If you don't want to, also great. I think it's ridiculous the way in the modern era we seem to over categorize things in an unironic way, and I think it is ridiculous if someone says that you are a poser and not a real goth because you don't wear full kit constantly all the time throughout your life. Like, look at me. I've got this great sweater that I wear. Today, you'll notice I did not put up a spooky background. I have some cabbage roses. So am I now not a goth adjacent alty person because I have cabbage roses for a YouTube background? Like, no, that's ridiculous. However you choose to participate in a subculture is valid for you. And I feel like I've ranted for quite a bit. I'm just going to check my notes and make sure I've covered everything. And yeah, you don't have to be able to categorize yourself as a certain goth to be a goth. You don't have to be a certain age or a certain level of perceived attractiveness. That is absolutely and utterly absurd. However you look, however you want to style yourself in the subculture is valid, and if it works for you, it works for me. And you are not less of a goth, less of a subculture participant because someone says you aren't pretty enough, or someone says you're too big or too small or too old, or you don't listen to the right music. Like, most of my music these days is like, I don't know why I held up my phone for you like that. That's not... Yes, I have a phone, as does everybody. Like, I listen to a lot of folk metal these days. Does that mean I'm not goth? Like, there's an entire branch of music called Southern Gothic that is mostly country and roots music. It's got the word Gothic in the name, but is that goth? Is that not? I like Casey Musgrave. I worship the ground that Dolly Parton walks on, and I don't think that makes my participation in the goth culture less valid. That's absurd. That's absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Don't feel like you need to be tethered to a certain definition to be a real valid goth. Don't think that. As a matter of fact, I think if you're going to limit yourself to very much the traditional things, like I have to be 100% goth all the time, I have to be a defined type of goth, and I can only ever listen to goth music, you are going to limit yourself in a very real way. You should expand your horizons a bit. So I have ranted for a very long time. I hope this has been interesting or helpful to you. As I said, there are lots of other, what I would call real YouTubers, because let's face it, I am so minute I don't even register, who have spoken about this in a far more articulate way. But at the end of the day, this is goth. Or maybe not, because as I say, I often just say goth adjacent person, because like I said, I have a whole bunch of things going on in my head aesthetically that don't fit the very, at least perceived, very narrow definition of a goth. So maybe my opinion doesn't matter at all. But I hope that this has been helpful to you. If you want to talk to me down in the comments of this video, I am more than happy to do that. And however you are able to participate in the subculture, in the culture, I've been using those two words interchangeably. I don't know if that's correct, but however you are willing and able to participate is cool and valid, and somebody calling you a poser is a dick. And you are wonderful and great, and that person does not deserve the space in your head. So on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, or don't. It's totally up to you. And hopefully I will have another spooky story for you very shortly. Goodbye.